This movie's what you get when your D&D party splits up and you're left with the B-list characters and a talking mouse. It's day 112 of 365. Today's movie, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. You don't have to travel through a magic painting to get to adventure if you go over to Ticket Stub Movie Club. There I have these daily Ticket Stub reviews as well as exclusive vodcasts and more. Discover more at the link in my profile. Directed by Mike Apted and starring Ben Barnes, Simon Pegg, and a very young Will Poulter. Those crazy eyebrows the first time we saw them on our big movie screen. This would be the final live-action Narnia adaptation until next year when we get Greta Gerwig's adaptation of The Magician's Nephew. That's right, it has been 15 years since we've had a Narnia movie in theaters. In the 15 years since this movie, my sadness has not waned that we never finished out the series with the silver chair and the final battle at least. Along with that and The Magician's Nephew and The Horse and His Boy, there's 4 movies from this series that could have been made. And it's actually one of my life goals to make an adaptation of The Horse and His Boy sans a running series at all. It's such a standalone story that I'd love to see it adapted. But we're here to talk about Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and this movie is probably one of the closest adaptations of the books that I've ever seen. It might be the closest book-to-movie adaptation I've ever seen in my life. Yeah, there's some differences that we'll get into, but honestly, the differences are kind of minor, and the things that they took out really make sense why you would take them out or change them in the way that they did. In 2010, I like this movie for all the reasons that they made it. The swashbuckling thing from Disney, although Disney wasn't involved with this one and it went to Fox, which is now Disney. It's kind of crazy the way these things change over the years. This kind of movie makes sense. It was totally made for me, and so I really enjoyed it. In 2025, I was kind of still charmed by it. I like a lot in this movie, and we can get into those 3 things that I really enjoyed about Voyage of the Dawn Treader. The first thing that I really enjoy about Voyage of the Dawn Treader is that it's really weird. We don't get many fantasy movies anymore, and especially through that time, when we would get them, they were always trying to become more and more cinematic. This is a weird book. It was written in the 50s, and fantasy was just kind of in a different place at the time. Lord of the Rings was more largely popular as a book series, and so weird fantasy was becoming the norm. I really like a movie that's willing to lean into some of the oddness and insanity. There are things that could have been dropped entirely that they decided to keep in. I'm thinking about the little troll guys with single feet. That's straight from the book. In fact, the only visual that they dropped was apparently these guys could sail around on the water on their foot. And I understand why they dropped that. It kind of breaks the laws of physics in a way that's not necessary to further the story. Outside of that, it just ends up being a very weird kind of tale. And they have the ability to add swashbuckling things in to make it that much more fun. But they kept it weird and strange. There are sequences where Eustace becoming a dragon and then undoing that is happening in the middle of a big epic fight scene with a sea monster. And they find a way to tie those 2 things together and make them part of each other. That's so odd. When I watched through this movie, there's so much that I didn't recall about it being just so odd and weird and offbeat. There are full sequences from the book that are just magic for magic's sake because that's what fantasy was at the time. And now we see those adapted directly in ways that are just fun to see. You have to give props when people do something odd or interesting just to stay true to the books. And that's why I compliment this as being so close to the books. I understand that they changed many things, but not in grand sweeping ways. This almost plots along exactly with the book, with those minor tweaks just to make it that much more cinematic, because things do have to make sense as a movie after all. You're adapting across a medium, and we've talked about that in other book adaptations on the series as well. This is still just so close. I can remember reading the book. I've read it many times in my life, and watching the movie, it plots along with all the major beats in ways that you can recall them happening. The second thing that I really dig about this movie is Reepicheep. He's my favorite character from the book, obviously, and having Simon Pegg here to voice the character, replacing, I think, Eddie Izzard, if I remember correctly, from the last movie, he's just so much fun. This is such an over-the-top, fun fantasy character. The CGI is not quite as good as it was in the previous movie. I know that the budget became a big issue and is a reason why Disney dropped out of it entirely, switching it over to Fox, which again is now owned by Disney anyways, so this is still technically a Disney production at the end of the day. That loss of budget and switching things around is what led to the CGI kind of having a dip, but it kind of doesn't really even matter to me. Like, these are bright, vibrant settings or very dark, dimly lit settings, both of which make CGI look very good because they're easiest to light. So they did themselves a lot of favors with the palette of this movie overall, and that keeps Reepicheep just looking so great. But his lines, his personality, like, this is a fully realized CGI character, and seeing that come to life, I was kind of surprised at how well it worked. I think in this movie, he works even better than Aslan does. And Aslan was like the big draw of the first movie, how well they did the CGI for him. So it's really cool to see that as being like a forwarded thing through the series, trying to keep these characters grounded, even though they are fully rendered in CGI. This also really differentiates it from those BBC series movies where everything was done with practical effects. Some to great degree, some of the makeup magic in that is really, really good, admittedly, and then some of it is just not good at all. So it's fun that we get both versions. We've seen both things. It makes me really interested to know what Greta Gerwig's going to be doing with her version. Is she going to do practical and CGI? Is she going to lean one way or the other? I'm really excited to see what the visual style of Narnia ends up being. Hopefully she sticks around long enough to make it up to the point where she can do her own version of Reepicheep, which I would love to see because he's one of my series favorite characters overall. The third thing that I really love about this movie is that they dropped all of the Christian sermon nonsense from it. I've read the book, and the book is deeply about characters changing for the good, and I love that. But C.S. Lewis was also a Christian, and this is one of his preachier books overall. Genuinely ends up being a little bit misogynist towards Lucy's character across the book, and so I love that while aspects of that were kept and saved to stay true to the story that was being told, it's not beating you over the head. Aslan doesn't have a sermon at the end of this, and he could have if they stayed true to the book. And so that's why when I hear complaints about this not being a perfect adaptation, I'm not mad. I'm glad they dropped that kind of stuff because I think it doesn't help overall and ends up hindering the story in ways that I just don't need. We still get all of the character growth, but we don't get browbeat with Christianity, and that's probably one of the better things that could happen out of this series. Hopefully Greta Gerwig's going in a similar direction. But what do you think? Are you a fan of the Disney Narnia series, or are you happy that it ended before they could get all the way to the final battle? We're sticking with fantasy, but we're going from kids' movies into very adult themes. Our next movie is The Warrior's Way, and as always, I'll see you tomorrow.